Okay, thank you very much for that, Tina. And now over to our next interview. I'm joined by the lovely Sian Jones of XReg Consulting. Hello, Sian.
Hello there, Ian. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. My name's Ian Taylor. I'm the chair of CryptoUK. So today we're going to discuss the recently published first draft of the new regulations for markets and crypto assets, also known as MiCA for short, which is proposed regulation covering the Eurozone. This recent publication follows an exhaustive public consultation, which closed in March this year, and followed two leaked non-papers that members of the community have seen over the last few months. We'll touch on this particular regulation as the main topic for this discussion, and then we'll also see what else is happening in the regulatory space. So if I may ask you, Sian, to give a brief introduction of yourself and the great work you do with XReg in Brussels, for example.
Well, thanks very much, Ian. I'm Sian Jones, as you know, and I'm senior partner at XReg Consulting. I spent a fair bit of time in Brussels, particularly around 2014, 15, 16, helping MEPs when they first needed to come to terms with this brave new world of what then was just virtual currencies. And here we are with a very extensive purpose-built piece of regulation, probably the first in the world that's as comprehensive as this one.
Thank you for that, Sian. And yeah, you are the perfect person to help us navigate what, in my experience, and us at CryptoUK, we did respond to this consultation, which I must say was some 150 pages long. So let's start with the first question. What is MiCA?
Well, it is, as you said, the Markets and Crypto Assets Regulation. It is a very broad and comprehensive piece of regulation that I think is bound to have a profound effect, not just in the EU, because it's an EU regulation, not just in the European Economic Area, which then includes Liechtenstein, Norway and Iceland, but I think it's going to have a profound impact really across the globe, simply by virtue of it being so comprehensive and Europe being such a large trading bloc.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that it's one of the largest pieces of regulation in the crypto industry. So who does this apply to then?
Well, I guess you could, at the highest level, say pretty much issuers of all manner of tokens, referred to as crypto assets. So that even includes utility tokens, then goes through stable coins, both of two different categories. Then also beyond that into what are going to be known as crypto asset service providers. So that's a broad range of service providers, the ones you might expect, such as exchanges and custodial wallet providers, but there's also a broader range, really anybody who's running a market or anyone who is providing a service into the space is going to be caught by this legislation.
Can you sort of give us an indication as to when you believe this will be transposed into law, and then folks in the industry will have to start, obviously, adhering to the new rules?
Yeah, well, it's super important is to understand that because it's not a directive but a regulation, there's no national transposition required. So once it comes into force, it's going to be applicable across all 27 member states plus the 3 extra EEA nations. And if you think about something like AMLD 4, 5, and so on, the anti-money laundering directives, if you think about MiFID, if you like, the long-established but equivalent piece of regulation that covers really financial instruments, then there you're looking at directives that once the directive came into force, then had to be transposed into national legislation. So it was a kind of two-stage process. This is going to be a directly applicable regulation. So I guess if you look at typical timelines, you're going to be looking at 1 to 2 years, 1 to 3 years as being quite the normal, certainly for something that is as broad and all-encompassing and wide-reaching as this, then you would expect that to take probably a couple of years to come into force. It's probably just worth adding to that, in that if, because some member states already have national regulatory frameworks for crypto assets, where that's the case and folks are already licensed under those arrangements, they just melt away when MiCA comes into force. So whatever you've already done disappears. Presumably the regulators in those countries will kind of transition people across quite easily, I should imagine. But the reality is the existing laws, where they exist, simply disappear.
All right, so let's get more into the detail here. So you briefly mentioned what's in scope. My involvement in crypto in the last few years, we've seen a number of different taxonomies that have been released, and the general consensus is, in my view, that we have the three different categories: payment, utility, and security token. So let's just talk a wee bit about MiCA's taxonomy and how it may slightly differ.
Well, absolutely. So what MiCA does is it says that everything that is already covered typically under MiFID, so anything that is a financial instrument, still already subject to MiFID and any other appropriate legislation, that doesn't change. So if it's a security token that meets the criteria for being a financial instrument, that stays exactly the same, and you can ignore MiCA. It's just still going to be governed under the existing arrangements. But it says that everything else that's a crypto asset, within a pretty broad definition of crypto assets, basically, any kind of asset that is based around DLT, everything that we know of as a token or a coin in the crypto sphere, is going to be then caught by MiCA. And that includes utility tokens. So there are a base level of requirements that will apply even to issuers of utility tokens. And then it sets a sort of next tier up, if you want to think of it like that, as stablecoins, which it defines either as asset reference tokens or e-money tokens. And if they're asset reference tokens, they'll be based on anything other than something which references a single fiat currency. Anything that references a single fiat currency, like a euro, for example, that will be deemed an e-money token. And effectively, both those categories each have separate, very specific and certainly more stringent rules applicable to them.
So and then there's the Tether, and that would be classed as an e-money token, right?
Tether would be the different forms of Tether would be e-money tokens. Libra's proposition under the version 2 point, version 2 white paper, where they would be based on single fiat currencies, so they would be classed as e-money tokens, whereas say the version 1 idea of a basket of tokens, Libra's sort of version 1 concept, that would have been an asset reference token. And there's a kind of top tier. Those stable coins, which the European Banking Authority, the EBA, which is a Europe-wide regulator, an existing regulator, deems to be a significant token, so a significant asset reference token or a significant e-money token, are subject to the most stringent rules.
Sort of who's in scope, which market participants and crypto businesses that does this cover? Now, we could assume that some of our members of CryptoUK, that the larger trading exchanges have the resource to look at this, to start complying with the regulation that's coming down the pipe. But what's your view on, say, the smaller startup, maybe a wallet provider? Does it impact them, and do they have to play by the same rules as the bigger players?
Well, essentially, yes. The carve-outs are mainly for issuers of tokens who are only planning to raise less than €1 million over a 12-month period. But for service providers, it's pretty much the same across the piece. The way that it's described is essentially anyone who provides a crypto asset service by way of business is caught, and then it lists out what those services are. They include any kind of custody or administration service, so custodial wallet providers, obviously, exchanges, and that's not only crypto to fiat crypto, but also crypto to crypto exchanges, those who operate trading platforms, and then those who are involved in either placing crypto assets or involved in order execution or order reception or transmission. And possibly the other one that's pretty significant, I think, are those who give advice relating to crypto assets, but only where that advice is specific and personalized. So generalized tips, Bitcoin's going to go up next week, I think. A broadcast to everyone probably is not caught by the way it's defined in this proposal. But me saying, Ian, I think we all ought to get into sushi tomorrow, that would be a personalized and specific piece of advice. So that kind of distinction is made. But again, this is very similar to the sorts of categories that you would have found for investment firms and under MiFID. Mm-hmm. Very similar type of arrangements.
Let's move on to sort of the other elements that we haven't touched on with this regulation. So firstly, market abuse, and unfortunately in any nascent industry this does occur, and we have seen a number of scams, whether it be ICO scams through to manipulation in trading volumes and pricing manipulation, for example. Does MiCA cover off the market abuse piece?
Yes, it does, and I guess it's something which market abuse piece covers really anyone who's involved in crypto assets that are admitted onto a trading platform that's operated by a CAS, by a crypto asset service provider. It covers things like disclosure of inside information, a prohibition on unlawful disclosure of inside information, for example, prohibitions on insider dealing, and prohibitions on market manipulation. So again, very similar to the kind of provisions that you'd see in traditional financial markets are now being applied to crypto markets.
Just as a final question for MiCA, and then we can touch on some of the other similar regulations going on across the globe right now. Let's talk about advertising and promotion of crypto, because we've all had emails or seen social media posts telling us that we can make 100 times an investment. What does MiCA say around companies or coins or projects promoting?
Well, there are very specific rules for issuers and what information needs to be put out. So there's a requirement for issuers of all categories to put out a white paper, and for that white paper to have certain prescribed information. For that, what I'll call the higher categories, so the stable coins, and then even higher category of significant stable coins, there are yet more stringent rules around the white papers. And indeed for all stable coins, they'll need to be effectively pre-approved, which fortunately they won't need to be for utility tokens, but they still have to be filed. And the information that's given in them has to be fair and not misleading, and you can't have ridiculous claims around that. That's going to be controlled. And the issuers and those who put out the information, in other words, are going to carry liability for that information. So that hopefully is going to provide the right kind of environment for those kind of outlandish claims that we sometimes have seen, or just irresponsible claims. Sometimes people who haven't gone out of their way to be deceptive, but just made really kind of negligent claims, not really balanced claims, and so on.
We in the industry just saw yesterday the regulator here, the FCA, has decided to ban the use of derivatives referencing crypto assets and ETNs, exchange traded notes. This was a public consultation that I worked on that closed the end of last year. I can say that well, let me just talk briefly about what this means to the industry. So the sale, marketing or distribution to retail customers of derivatives and ETNs that reference unregulated crypto assets, at the moment unregulated, but maybe not in a few years, will be banned in the UK from the beginning of next year. So I can tell you from my analysis that 97% of the respondents were against this. So you could argue that nobody's listening, or the flip side is the regulator will say, well, most people that respond are going to be against such a suggestion. And just the main points coming out of this review are in regards to the volatility of crypto assets and the price manipulation and valuation side to it. So I can tell you that this isn't a welcome piece from the industry. So we're CryptoUK will continue to work with the folks at the FCA and Treasury to try and move forward with this, because it does seem somewhat of a disparity from what the industry were looking for.
Yeah. I think at least the institutional investors, as I read it, can still will still be able to work and invest in such products. This is really to protect retail investors that they feel are not as well equipped. So, qualifying investors, high net worths, and so on will still be able to avail themselves of this kind of product, as will institutional investors.
Okay, well, I think we've sort of run out of time here. So big thank you to you, Sian. If anybody wants to reach out to you, where can they contact you?
Well, I think it says right above my head. XReg Consulting is our website. There's you can send us a message there. You can find me on LinkedIn, Sian Jones Coinsalt, or indeed on any other channel that you care to search for me on. Whether you're in the public sector or the private sector, we work on policy and regulation, so you'll be able to find us there, and we'll happily give you the benefit of our experience and expertise.
Well, thank you, Sian. And from my side, I'm Ian Taylor, Chair of CryptoUK. You can find us at www.cryptouk.io. There's links to email addresses there. So if you have any questions for us, please reach out. That's it from us. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Ian.